She walked into the most exclusive restaurant in Manhattan, wearing a sweater 3 sizes too big and glasses thick enough to stop a bullet. Elena Vance wanted to be rejected. She wanted her blind date to take one look at her and run. But she made a fatal mistake. She didn't sit down with the boring accountant her stepmother arranged. By accident, she sat at the table of Lorenzo Moretti, the most dangerous capo in the New York underworld. And while every other man saw a mess, Lorenzo saw a challenge. This is the story of the girl who dressed ugly to save her heart, only to hand it directly to the devil. The rain in New York City didn't wash things clean, it just made the grime slicker. Elena Vance stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror of her cramped apartment on West 4th Street. Most women spent Friday nights contouring their cheekbones and squeezing into spans. Elena was currently doing the opposite. She pulled a woolen, shapeless gray cardigan over her head, a garment she had found at a Salvation Army bin in Queens specifically for this purpose. It smelled faintly of mothballs and despair. "Perfect," she whispered, adjusting the thick, horn-rimmed glasses she'd bought off a prop website. The lenses were non-prescription glass, but they magnified her eyes in a way that made her look perpetually startled and slightly unhinged. She wasn't crazy. She was desperate. Her stepmother, Beatrice, a woman whose heart was as cold as her diamond-encrusted fingers, had arranged this blind date. Beatrice controlled the family trust, the one that held the deed to Elena's late father's antique bookshop. The ultimatum was simple: marry a man of status, or the bookshop gets turned into a vape store. Tonight's candidate was Richard Sterling, a hedge fund analyst Beatrice described as solvent and breathing. Elena had no intention of marrying Richard, but she couldn't refuse the date, so she had devised a fail-safe strategy: become the most unappealing woman in Manhattan. If he rejected her, Beatrice couldn't blame Elena for not trying. She pulled her chaotic curls back into a severe, unflattering bun and applied a shade of lipstick that could best be described as corpse beige. She checked her watch, a battered Timex, 7:45 p.m. The reservation was at Le Cuckoo on Lafayette Street. It was a place where the waiters wore tuxedos and the water cost more than her rent. She was going to stick out like a sore thumb. That was the point. Elena grabbed her canvas tote bag, ignoring her designer clutch, and headed out into the rain. When she arrived at Le Cuckoo, the maître d' looked at her as if she were a delivery driver who had wandered in through the wrong entrance. "I have a reservation," Elena said, pitching her voice a little too high, adding a slight nervous tremor. "Under Sterling?" The maître d' curled his lips, scanning the iPad. "Ah, Mr. Sterling hasn't arrived, but his table is ready." He hesitated, clearly not wanting to seat her in the main dining room. "Perhaps a table in the back?" "No," Elena said, channeling the most oblivious energy she could muster. "I like the view. That booth in the corner. The dark one." She pointed to a secluded semicircular booth upholstered in oxblood leather, shadowed by a heavy velvet curtain. It was the power seat. The Godfather seat. The maître d' paled. "Miss, that table is reserved for a VIP guest who—" "Oh, don't worry," Richard said. He pulled strings. Elena lied smoothly, brushing past him. She knew enough about high-end dining to know that money talked, but confidence screamed. She sat down in the booth before he could stop her. The view was commanding. She could see the entire dining room, the crystal chandeliers reflecting off the wine glasses. She slumped in her seat, pulled out a paperback copy of Dostoevsky, and waited for Richard the analyst to arrive and run for the hills. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. At 8:15 p.m., the air in the restaurant shifted. It wasn't a sound. It was a pressure change. The chatter died down. Waiters straightened their spines. A man walked in. He was tall, wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that fit him with lethal precision. His hair was dark, swept back, exposing a face that was too sharp to be classically handsome, but too captivating to look away from. He didn't walk. He prowled. He was flanked by 2 other men who looked like they chewed concrete for breakfast, but they stopped at the bar. The man in the charcoal suit continued alone. He walked straight toward Elena's booth. Finally, Elena thought, Richard the analyst. He looks better than I expected. Beatrice must have actually tried this time. She immediately hunched her shoulders, shoved her glasses up her nose, and adopted a mouth-breathing expression. She prepared her opening line, something about her collection of taxidermied ferrets, The man stopped at the edge of the table. He looked down at her. His eyes were a startling, icy blue, creating a violent contrast with his dark features. He didn't look confused. He looked amused. "You're in my seat," he said. His voice was a low rumble, like a luxury car idling in a garage. Elena blinked. She didn't break character. "Richard, you're late. And you're rude. Sit down. My feet hurt, and I ordered breadsticks." The man's eyebrows shot up. For a second, the air crackled with tension. The maitre d' was sprinting across the room, sweat beading on his forehead, looking ready to tackle Elena to the ground. The man held up a hand, stopping the maitre d' in his tracks without even looking at him. He never took his eyes off. "Elena." "Richard," the man repeated, testing the name on his tongue. He slid into the booth opposite her, his movements fluid and predatory. "Well then, I apologize for my tardiness." He wasn't Richard. Elena realized it instantly. Richard was supposed to be 5 feet 8 inches and balding. This man was 6 foot plus of pure danger. But if she admitted she was at the wrong table, she'd be kicked out, Beatrice would find out, and the bookshop was doomed. She had to commit. "It's fine," she sniffed, wiping her nose on her sleeve. A touch of genius, she thought. "I'm Elena. I hope you like cats. I have 9. The stranger leaned back, resting his arm on the leather banquette. He unbuttoned his suit jacket, revealing a glimpse of a gun holster beneath the silk lining. Elena missed it, focused on maintaining her ugly duckling facade. 9 cats, he said, his face deadpan. "Fascinating. Tell me their names." Lorenzo Moretti had not come to La Cuckoo to discuss cats. He was the underboss of the Moretti crime syndicate, currently controlling the majority of the shipping lines from New Jersey to Charleston. He was here to meet a Russian arms dealer named Volkov to negotiate a ceasefire. It was a meeting that required absolute precision. Instead, he found a woman who looked like a librarian, who had been tumble-dried on high heat sitting in his reserved booth. When he first saw her, his instinct was to have security remove her. But then she spoke. She ordered him to sit down. She wiped her nose on her sleeve. And yet, beneath the oversized glasses and the hideous gray wool, Enzo saw something that stopped him cold. Her hands. They were resting on the table, clutching a book. They were delicate, with long, slender fingers, manicured perfectly clear. They were the hands of a pianist, or an artist. They didn't match the sleeve. And her eyes. Behind the thick glass, they weren't vacant. They were calculating. She was scanning him, reading him. She was playing a game. Enzo Moretti loved games. He decided Volkov could wait. The Russian was likely late anyway, playing his own power games. "Their names?" Enzo prompted again, signaling the waiter to pour water. Elena stammered, caught off guard by his compliance. "Mr. Whiskers, Fluffy, Deathbringer, Chairman Meow. Look, are we going to order? I have a yeast infection seminar to get to at 9. Enzo choked on his water. He actually coughed, masking a laugh. He hadn't laughed in 3 years. Not since the hit on his father. "A seminar," he said, regaining his composure, his blue eyes dancing. "You lead a busy life, Elena." "You have no idea," she said, grabbing a breadstick and chewing it aggressively. "So, Richard, Beatrice says you work in finance. That sounds boring. Do you enjoy it?" "Finance," Enzo mused. "Yes, I deal in acquisitions, hostile takeovers, liquidations." "Liquidations," Elena nodded. "Like selling furniture?" "Something like that," Enzo replied, watching her mouth. She had full lips, hidden under that terrible beige paste. He had a sudden, violent urge to wipe it off with his thumb. "I hate money," Elena declared, throwing a curveball. "It ruins everything. My stepmother thinks you're a catch because you have a portfolio. I think you're probably a narcissist who compensates for deep-seated insecurities with expensive suits." She gestured to his lapel. "Is that Brioni?" Enzo froze. A woman wearing a Salvation Army sweater shouldn't know the cut of a Brioni Vanquish 2 suit. "You have a sharp eye for someone who hates money," Enzo said softly. The playfulness vanished from his voice, replaced by the steel that made grown men tremble. Elena realized her slip. She pushed her glasses up, I read GQ at the dentist's office. Don't flatter yourself. Who are you really, Elena? He asked, leaning in. The candlelight caught the sharp angle of his jaw. He smelled of expensive scotch, gunpowder, and rain. It was intoxicating. Elena felt a flush rise up her neck that had nothing to do with the wool sweater. I told you, she said, her voice dropping an octave, losing the fake squeak. I'm the woman you don't want to marry. Is that so? Enzo murmured. And what if I like a challenge? For a moment, the restaurant noise faded. They were locked in a stare. Elena felt stripped bare, as if he could see the silk dress she had almost worn, the intellect she was hiding, the fire in her gut. Then, a shadow fell over the table. Lorenzo! A voice boomed. Elena jumped. Standing at the table was a massive man with a scar running through his left eyebrow. He was followed by 3 others. They didn't look like waiters. They looked like the reason people went missing. Enzo didn't flinch. He didn't even look up immediately. He took a sip of his wine, then slowly turned his head. Volkov, Enzo said. You're early. And you have company, the Russian sneered, looking at Elena with disgust. The circus is in town? Elena bristled. She might be pretending to be ugly, but she didn't like being insulted by a man wearing a chain thick enough to anchor a boat. I'm his date. Elena piped up, standing up. She was surprisingly tall. And who are you, the bodyguard? You missed a spot shaving. She pointed to his scar. The table went silent. The air left the room. Volkov's face turned purple. He reached for his jacket pocket. In a blur of motion, Enzo was on his feet. He grabbed a steak knife from the table and slammed it down. Not into Volkov, but into the heavy wooden table, mere millimeters from Volkov's hand. The handle vibrated with the force of the impact. She speaks, Enzo said, his voice terrifyingly calm, and you listen. If you touch her, Volkov, I will liquidate you. And I don't mean furniture. Elena stood frozen. This was definitely not Richard the analyst. Enzo turned to her, his expression unreadable. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a black card with a singular gold embossment of a lion, and tucked it into the pocket of her gray cardigan. The seminar, he said. You should go. It's going to get loud in here. Elena stammered. Go, he commanded. Elena grabbed her tote bag and scrambled out of the booth. She didn't look back. She ran past the terrified maitre d', out the door, and into the pouring rain. She ran until her lungs burned, collapsing under the awning of a bodega 3 blocks away. She looked down at the card he had given her. It had no name, no company, just a phone number and a single initial, L. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She should be terrified. She should call the police. Instead, she felt the strangest sensation she had ever experienced in her 26 years of life. She wanted to go back. The adrenaline from the restaurant didn't fade until Elena was safely behind the locked door of her apartment. She peeled off the wool sweater as if it were on fire. She scrubbed the pale makeup from her face, revealing skin that naturally glowed with a warm olive undertone. She unpinned her hair, letting the dark chestnut curls cascade down her back. Staring at herself in the mirror, she looked like a completely different person. The ugly Elena was gone. In her place was the woman she kept hidden from Beatrice, the woman who was too vibrant, too intelligent, and too beautiful to be controlled. Who was he? She whispered to the empty room. She pulled the black card from her pocket. L. No surname, just that singular, commanding letter. She ran her thumb over the gold embossing. It felt dangerous. It felt like a promise. The next morning, Elena tried to bury the memory of the blue-eyed stranger under a mountain of paperwork. She owned the Gilded Page, a rare bookstore in the West Village that smelled of vanilla, dust, and history. It was her sanctuary, the only thing her father had left her that Beatrice couldn't easily liquidate. Yet. You look distracted, said Sophie, her assistant and only friend. Sophia was shelving a stack of Victorian poetry collections. Did the date go that badly? Did Richard the analyst try to show you his Excel spreadsheets? Elena sighed, leaning against the mahogany counter. I didn't meet Richard. Sophie dropped a book. What? You stood him up? Accidentally. I sat at the wrong table. Elena picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. With a man who... Sophie, he pulled a knife on a Russian giant because he insulted me. And I was wearing the gray sack of doom sweater? Sophie's eyes widened. A knight in shining armor? In New York? He's either a psychopath or a billionaire. Or both. He was terrifying, Elena admitted, a shiver tracing her spine. And the most magnetic person I've ever met? Before she could elaborate, the bell above the door chimed. The air in the shop changed instantly. It wasn't the gentle tinkle of a customer browsing. The door was thrown open with force. Beatrice marched in. Elena's stepmother was a vision in Chanel and malice. She slapped a leather handbag onto the counter, narrowly missing a first edition of Jane Eyre. You ungrateful little wretch, Beatrice hissed, her voice tight with controlled rage. Elena straightened her spine. Good morning to you too, Beatrice. Don't play coy with me, Richard called. He said he waited 40 minutes for you. You never showed up. Beatrice's eyes narrowed. Do you realize what you've done? The Sterling merger was contingent on that family liking you. You have embarrassed me. You have embarrassed the Vance name. I went to the restaurant, Elena argued, though her heart sank. There was a mix-up. There are no mix-ups in my world, Elena. Beatrice slammed her hand on the counter. I am done playing games. I am selling the building. You have until the end of the month to vacate. I've already received an offer from a developer who wants to turn this place into a luxury dog spa. You can't, Elena gasped, the blood draining from her face. The trust states I have discretion over assets if you are deemed irresponsible. Standing up a finance tycoon is the definition of irresponsible. Beatrice smirked, a cruel, painted smile. Pack your books, darling. You're finished. Beatrice spun on her heel and stormed out, leaving the shop shaking in her wake. Elena gripped the counter, her knuckles white. She couldn't lose the shop. It was her soul. But she had no money, no allies, and thanks to her ugly disguise stunt, no potential husband to placate Beatrice. She needed a miracle. Or a weapon. Across town, in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, Lorenzo Moretti was staring at a surveillance photo. We found her, Luca said, placing a folder on the glass desk. Luca was Enzo's consigliere, a man who could find a needle in a haystack, provided the needle had a digital footprint. Enzo picked up the photo. It was a grainy shot taken from a traffic camera near the restaurant. It showed the woman in the gray sweater, running in the rain. No hits on facial recognition, Luca said, sounding perplexed. The glasses and the lack of makeup threw off the algorithm. However, we tracked the taxi she hailed 3 blocks away. It dropped her off in the West Village. The West Village, Enzo murmured. We canvassed the area, showed the sketch to locals. No one recognized the bag lady, as the bodega owner called her. But, Luca hesitated. One of our guys spotted a woman entering a bookstore this morning. She matches the height and build. But boss, she doesn't look like the woman at the restaurant. Enzo looked up, his interest piqued. Show me. Luca slid a second photo across the desk. This one was high definition, taken with a telephoto lens. It was Elena. The real Elena. She was standing in the window of the Gilded Page, arranging a display. She was wearing a fitted emerald green dress that hugged her curves. Her hair was loose and wild. She was breathtaking. But Enzo recognized her instantly. Not by the face, but by the posture. The defiant tilt of the chin. The way she held a book against her chest like a shield. It's her, Enzo said softly. A slow smile spread across his face. A smile that terrified his enemies. She was in disguise, Luca realized. Why would a woman dress like a homeless librarian to go to La Cuckoo? To hide, Enzo said. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. She didn't want to be seen. Or she didn't want to be chosen. What do you want to do, boss? Should we bring her in? Volkov is still making noise about the disrespect. No, Enzo said, checking the load of his pistol before tucking it into his holster. Volkov is a blunt instrument. This requires finesse. She played a game with me. Now it's my turn to roll the dice. Where are you going? To buy a book, Enzo replied. The rain had returned, drumming a relentless rhythm against the windows of the Gilded Page. The shop was empty, save for the scent of old paper and Elena's quiet panic. She was sitting on the floor in the philosophy section, surrounded by ledgers, trying to find a loophole in the trust fund documents. The bell chimed. We're closing in 5 minutes, Elena called out without looking up. rubbing her temples. I have time, a deep voice replied. Elena froze. The ledgers slipped from her lap, hitting the floor with a dull thud. She knew that voice. It was the voice of expensive scotch and gunpowder. She scrambled to her feet, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She smoothed her green dress, suddenly painfully aware that she wasn't wearing her armor of ugliness. She was exposed. She stepped out from the aisle. Standing near the entrance, shaking raindrops from a black umbrella, was Enzo. He was even larger in the small shop than he had been in the restaurant. He filled the space, his presence sucking the oxygen out of the room. He was wearing a navy suit today, tailored to perfection, with a black trench coat draped over his shoulders like a cape. He turned slowly, his icy blue eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, he said nothing. He just looked. His gaze traveled from her heels, up the curve of her hips, lingering on her waist, and finally resting on her face. There was no confusion in his eyes, only recognition and possession. Elena, he said. It sounded like a caress. Elena's throat went dry. I think you have the wrong person. My name is... Don't, he interrupted, walking toward her. His steps were silent, predatory. Don't insult my intelligence, and I won't insult yours. Where are the glasses? And the sweater that smelled of mothballs? Elena backed up, until her hips hit the display table. I burned them. Enzo stopped a foot away from her. He was close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. A pity. I was growing fond of the librarian look. But this... He gestured vaguely at her, his eyes darkening. This is an improvement. Who are you? Elena whispered. How did you find me? I'm the man whose table you stole, Enzo said. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face. Elena flinched, expecting violence, but he simply tucked a loose curl of hair behind her ear. His fingers were rough, calloused, but his touch was shockingly gentle. And finding people is what I do. Are you going to hurt me? She hated the tremble in her voice. Enzo laughed, a low, dark sound. Hurt you? Elena, I haven't decided if I want to frame you or worship you. Why did you dress like that? Elena looked into his eyes and saw a glimmer of genuine curiosity. She decided to tell the truth. It was the only weapon she had left. To save myself, she said, lifting her chin. My stepmother is trying to sell me off to a boring accountant so she can keep control of my inheritance. I dressed ugly so he would reject me. If he rejects me, I can't be blamed. Enzo stared at her, processing this. Then he grinned. It wasn't a nice grin. It was the grin of a wolf who just realized the lamb had teeth. Smart, he murmured. Devious. I like it. He turned away from her, walking toward the rare book glass cabinet. Does it work, the strategy? No, Elena said bitterly. My stepmother found out I stood him up. Now she's going to sell the store. This store. She gestured around the room, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. It's all I have. Enzo looked at the glass cabinet. Inside was a first edition of The Great Gatsby. How much? He asked. What? The store. How much to save it? Elena blinked. It's not about money. It's the deed. Beatrice holds the deed. She won't sell it to me. She wants to destroy it out of spite. Enzo turned back to her. His expression had shifted. The playfulness was gone, replaced by the cold, calculating look of a business tycoon. I can get the deed, Enzo said flatly. I can make Beatrice sign it over to you. Tonight. Elena felt the room spin. How? She's impossible. Nobody is impossible to persuade, Enzo said, his voice laced with a lethal undertone. I specialize in persuasion. Why? Elena asked, suspicion warring with hope. Why would you do that for a stranger who stole your table? Enzo closed the distance between them again. This time, he didn't stop until he was looming over her, trapping her against the table. He placed his hands on the wood on either side of her hips, caging her in. Because you owe me, he whispered, his face inches from hers. You interrupted my meeting. You insulted my associate. You cost me a contract. So now we make a new contract, Enzo said. Elena's heart pounded so hard she thought he could hear it. What do you want? You need a fiancé? Enzo said. To satisfy the trust. To get Beatrice off your back. I need a fake fiancé, she corrected. No. Enzo shook his head slowly. You need a protector. Beatrice is the least of your problems. That Russian you insulted? Volkov? He doesn't forgive. He knows your face now. He knows you're with me. If I leave you alone, you'll be dead within a week. Elena gasped. The reality of the situation crashed down on her. She had thought it was just a bad date. She hadn't realized she had stepped into a war zone. So here is the deal, Enzo said. I will handle Beatrice. I will save your bookshop. I will keep Volkov away from you. And in return? Elena asked breathlessly. Enzo's eyes dropped to her lips, then back up to her eyes. The intensity was scorching. In return, he said, you belong to me. You play the part of my fiancé. In public, in private, until I say the debt is paid. For how long? As long as it takes. Elena looked at him. He was dangerous. He was criminal. He was everything she should run from. But when she looked at the door, she didn't see an exit. She saw the world that wanted to crush her. Beatrice, the vape shop developer, the Russian mobster. Then she looked at Enzo. He was offering a cage, yes, but it was a gilded cage, and inside it she would be safe. Deal, she whispered. Enzo smirked. He leaned down and brushed his lips against her ear. Good choice, Kara, he murmured. Now lock the door. We have a wedding to plan. As Elena moved to flip the sign, "Tooled Stay" closed, she saw a black SUV idle at the curb. Two men in suits got out and stood guard by the window. She realized then that she hadn't just made a deal. She had just signed her soul over to the devil. And God help her, she was excited to see what he would do with it. The drive to the Vance family estate in the Upper East Side was silent. Enzo drove the blacked-out Maserati himself, his knuckles loose on the leather steering wheel, while Elena sat in the passenger seat, gripping the door handle. She felt like she was heading to her execution. Or perhaps she was bringing the executioner with her. Stop shaking, Enzo said, his eyes fixed on the road. Predators smell fear, and your stepmother is a predator. She's worse, Elena muttered, smoothing the skirt of her green dress. She's a socialite with a dwindling trust fund. They eat their young. Not this time, Enzo said. He reached over and placed his hand over hers. His palm was warm, rough, and strangely grounding. Tonight, you are not Elena Vance, the unwanted stepdaughter. You are the future Mrs. Lorenzo Moretti. Act like you own the pavement you walk on. They pulled up to the limestone townhouse. It was a monument to old money and cold hearts. As they exited the car, Enzo didn't just offer his arm. He pulled her flush against his side, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. Beatrice was in the drawing room, holding court with 3 other women from the Historical Preservation Society. They were drinking tea from porcelain cups that cost more than Elena's car. When the maid announced them, Beatrice looked up with a sneer that faltered instantly when she saw Enzo. Men like Lorenzo Moretti didn't exist in Beatrice's world. Her world was soft, filled with men in cashmere sweaters who played squash. Enzo was hard angles, dark shadows, and raw violence wrapped in a $5,000 suit. Elena? Beatrice stood up, her pearls clinking. What is the meaning of this? You interrupt my tea to bring a stranger? Not a stranger, Elena said, her voice shaking slightly before she felt Enzo's thumb stroke her hip. A silent command to be brave. She lifted her chin. Beatrice, this is Lorenzo, my fiancé. The teacup in Beatrice's hand rattled against the saucer. Fiancé? You? Don't be absurd. You couldn't keep a date with Richard Sterling for an hour, and now I'm supposed to believe you're engaged to... She looked Enzo up and down, her lip curling. Who are you? Enzo stepped forward. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The other 3 women suddenly found their shoes very interesting. Lorenzo Moretti, he said, his voice smooth as velvet and cold as ice. And I suggest you ask your friends to leave, Beatrice. We have family business to discuss. I will do no such thing, Beatrice shrilled. You can't just barge in here and... Enzo didn't yell. He didn't even raise his voice. He simply walked over to the antique coffee table, picked picked up a crystal vase, and inspected it. "Luca?" Enzo said to the empty air. The front door opened. Luca, the consigliere, walked in carrying a leather briefcase. He set it down on the table, sweeping the tea service aside with a callous disregard that made the women gasp. "Ladies," Enzo said, turning his icy gaze to Beatrice's guests. "Get out." They didn't wait for Beatrice's permission. They grabbed their purses and fled, sensing the violence radiating off him. Beatrice was trembling now, her face pale. "I'll call the police." "You could," Enzo said, sitting down in a wingback chair and crossing his legs. He gestured for Elena to sit. She sat on the arm of his chair, her heart pounding. "But then the police would have to look at these." He opened the briefcase. He tossed a stack of photos and bank statements onto the table. Beatrice looked down. Her eyes widened. "Where did you get these?" "The Cayman Islands are beautiful this time of year," Enzo drawled. "But their banking privacy laws aren't as watertight as you think. Not when you know the right people." Elena leaned forward, looking at the papers. She gasped. "Beatrice, this is the trust money. You've been siphoning it." "She's been bleeding it dry," Enzo corrected, "to pay for her gambling debts in Atlantic City, and to fund that young tennis instructor. She keeps in an apartment in Soho." Beatrice collapsed onto the sofa. I had to. The maintenance on this house is theft," Enzo finished. "Grand larceny, fraud, embezzlement." He leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. "I can send this file to the district attorney in the next 5 minutes. You'll trade your Chanel for an orange jumpsuit, Beatrice. Or, Beatrice whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Or you sign over the deed to the Gilded Page to Elena. Immediately. Irrevocably. And you resign as executor of the trust, granting full control to her." "That shop is worth millions," Beatrice wailed. "Your freedom is worth more," Enzo said. He pulled a fountain pen from his pocket, a Mont Blanc, and uncapped it. He placed the deed on top of the incriminating evidence. "Sign." Beatrice looked at Elena. She looked for mercy. She found none. Elena thought of her father, of the books Beatrice wanted to destroy, of the years of emotional abuse. "Sign it, Beatrice," Elena said softly, "or I'll call the police myself." With a shaking hand, Beatrice signed. Enzo snatched the paper away the moment the ink touched the page. He handed it to Elena. "It's yours." Beatrice slumped, defeated. "Get out of my house." Enzo stood up, pulling Elena with him. He paused at the door and looked back at the older woman. "One more thing," Enzo said. "Elena is a Moretti now. If you ever speak to her again, if you ever look at her wrong, if you ever breathe in her direction, I won't send the police. I'll come back myself." He didn't need to elaborate. The threat hung in the air, heavy and absolute. They walked out into the cool evening air. Elena clutched the deed to her chest. She felt lightheaded. She felt invincible. "You did it," she breathed. Enzo stopped at the car door. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable. "We did it. Now the first part of the debt is paid." "And the second?" Elena asked, feeling the tension shift from triumph to something darker, more intimate. Enzo opened the car door. "Get in. You need a dress. We have a gala to attend on Saturday. And Volkov will be there." The Moretti Winter Gala was the kind of event that made the cover of Vanity Fair, but the guest list was strictly monitored by the FBI. It was held in a massive ballroom in a midtown hotel owned by the family. Elena stood in front of the mirror in Enzo's penthouse suite. The dress he had chosen for her was weaponized glamour. It was a backless gown of liquid crimson silk that pooled at her feet like blood. It had a slit that went up to her thigh, revealing the gun holster strapped to her leg. "Do I really need this?" Elena asked, adjusting the small, pearl-handled pistol. "I hope not," Enzo said, emerging from the shadows. He was wearing a tuxedo that made him look like a prince of darkness. He adjusted his cufflinks. But in my world, hope is a liability. Preparation is survival. He walked over to her, standing behind her, their reflections meeting in the mirror. He placed a diamond necklace around her neck, a collar of ice to match the fire of her dress. You look dangerous, he murmured, his breath ghosting over her neck. I feel terrified, she admitted. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. He turned her around, his hands gripping her waist. Tonight, Volkov will test us. He thinks I'm weak because I didn't kill him at the restaurant. He thinks you're a weakness. We have to show him that we are a united front. That you are not just a date, but a queen on the board. And if he tries something, then he learns why the lion is the king of the jungle. When they entered the ballroom, silence rippled through the crowd. All eyes were on Enzo, and by extension, on the stunning woman in red on his arm. Elena kept her head high, channeling the confidence Enzo had instilled in her. She saw men with scars hidden under expensive collars and women with eyes as sharp as diamonds. They moved through the room, Enzo introducing her to politicians, judges, and other crime bosses. She played the role perfectly, charming, witty, and utterly devoted to him. Then the music changed. A heavy, rhythmic tango began to play. Dance with me, Enzo commanded. He pulled her onto the floor. They moved together, a swirl of black and red. Enzo was a masterful dancer, leading her with firm, precise movements. The chemistry between them was palpable, electric. It wasn't just a performance. With every dip, every touch, Elena felt herself falling deeper. This man was a monster, yes, but he was her monster. You're doing well, he whispered against her ear as he spun her. I'm terrified I'm going to step on your feet, she breathless replied. I'd let you, he said. Suddenly, the crowd parted. Volkov stood at the edge of the dance floor, holding a vodka glass, his face flushed. He wasn't alone. He had 6 men with him. The music stopped. Moretti, Volkov boomed, his voice slurring slightly. Dancing while the city burns? How Roman of you. Enzo didn't let go of Elena's waist. Volkov, you're drunk. Go home. I don't take orders from you anymore. Volkov spat. He looked at Elena with hungry, hateful eyes. And I don't like that you bring your whore to our business meetings. The entire room gasped. Enzo went perfectly still. It was the stillness of a bomb just before detonation. Elena, Enzo said quietly, go to the bar. Get a drink. Enzo, no, she whispered, gripping his arm. Go. She stepped back, her heart hammering. She moved toward the edge of the room, but she didn't go to the bar. She watched. Volkov laughed. Hiding behind your skirts? I challenge you, Moretti. Right here. It happened in a flash. Volkov pulled a knife, a jagged, military-grade blade, and lunged. Enzo didn't draw a gun. He didn't step back. He met the charge. He caught Volkov's wrist in mid-air, twisting it with a sickening crunch. But Volkov was strong, and his other hand swung a second blade, a hidden dagger, aimed straight for Enzo's throat. Enzo! Elena screamed. Without thinking, she did the only thing she could. She grabbed a heavy crystal ice bucket from a passing waiter's tray and hurled it. It smashed into the face of one of Volkov's bodyguards, who was raising a gun to shoot Enzo in the back. The distraction was minute, but it was enough. Enzo sidestepped the dagger, swept Volkov's legs out from under him, and drove Volkov's own knife into the Russian's shoulder, pinning him to the parquet floor. Chaos erupted. Screams! Guns drawn! Enzo stood over Volkov, his chest heaving, his eyes wild. He looked up and saw Elena. She wasn't cowering. She was standing over the bodyguard she had hit, holding the pearl-handled pistol she had taken from her thigh, aiming it at the man's head to keep him down. The room froze. Lorenzo Moretti looked at the woman in the red dress. He didn't see a librarian. He didn't see a fake fiancé. He saw a partner. He walked over to her, ignoring the blood on his hands. He took the gun gently from her shaking fingers. Did you kill him? Elena whispered, looking at Volkov. who was groaning in agony. "No," Enzo said loud enough for the room to hear. "I let him live. Because today is a celebration." He turned to the crowd, wrapping an arm around Elena's shoulders, pulling her against his blood-splattered suit. "My fiancé has excellent aim. I suggest no one else tests it." He looked down at her, his eyes blazing with a mix of adrenaline and raw lust. "Let's go," he rasped. "Now." They swept out of the ballroom, leaving a stunned underworld behind them. They didn't speak in the elevator. The tension was suffocating. The moment the doors of the penthouse suite closed behind them, Enzo didn't turn on the lights. He pushed her against the door, his mouth crashing onto hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was acclaiming. It tasted of violence and survival. Elena kissed him back with equal force, her hands tangling in his hair, ruining his perfect style. The fear of the evening transmuted into desire. "You're crazy," he growled against her lips, his hands roaming over the red silk, throwing ice buckets at hitmen. "You could have been killed." "You were in trouble," she panted. "I had it handled." "You didn't see the second gunman." Enzo froze. He pulled back slightly, resting his forehead against hers. "You saved me." "I guess I did." He looked at her, really looked at her, his blue eyes stripping her bare. "You realize there is no going back now? Volkov will come for you. The whole world knows who you are." "I know," Elena said. She reached up and touched his cheek, tracing the line of his jaw. "I'm not the girl in the gray sweater anymore, Enzo. I don't want to hide." Enzo let out a ragged breath. He picked her up, wrapping her legs around his waist, and carried her toward the bedroom. "Good," he said. "Because I'm never letting you go." 3 weeks had passed since the blood-soaked gala. New York City was covered in a fresh blanket of snow, muffling the sounds of the street. But inside the Moretti Empire, the noise was deafening. Volkov had vanished from the hospital before the police could formalize his arrest, disappearing into the underworld like a wounded, rabid dog. Elena had returned to the Gilded Page. Enzo had tried to keep her locked in the penthouse for her safety, but Elena had refused. "If I hide," she had told him, adjusting his tie, "then he wins. I am a Moretti now. We don't hide." So she went to work. But things were different. 2 of Enzo's best men stood guard outside the shop, disguised as customers reading newspapers. It was late on a Tuesday. The shop was closed. Elena was in the back office, auditing the new inventory. The air smelled of vanilla and old parchment. It was peaceful until the lights cut out. The shop plunged into pitch blackness. Elena didn't scream. She didn't panic. She stopped typing. Slowly, deliberately, she opened the bottom drawer of her desk. Inside, resting on a velvet cloth, was the pearl-handled pistol Enzo had given her. She checked the safety, her hands steady. "You can come out," she called into the darkness. Her voice didn't tremble. "I know you're there." A low, rasping chuckle echoed from the front of the store. Heavy boots crunched on the wooden floorboards. "Smart girl," Volkov's voice sneered. "Moretti taught you well." "He taught me how to spot a rat," Elena replied, standing up and moving behind the heavy oak desk. "The guards outside are dead, aren't they?" "Sleeping," Volkov corrected. A beam of moonlight cut through the window, illuminating his silhouette. He looked worse for wear. His arm was in a sling, his face pale and sweating. He was desperate. "I'm not here for them. I'm here for his heart, and you are his heart." "You think killing me will destroy him?" Elena asked, buying time. She knew Enzo was on his way. He tracked her heartbeat via the smartwatch he insisted she wear. He would know her pulse had just spiked. "I think killing you will make him careless," Volkov snarled. He stepped into the office, a silencer-equipped pistol in his good hand. "And when he is careless, I will end him." "You're making a mistake, Volkov. The only mistake was not killing you at the restaurant when you looked like a beggar." He spat. He raised the gun. Elena dropped behind the desk, just as the bullet shattered a vase of lilies, where her head had been a second before. She crawled, not away from him, but toward the side of the room where the master switch for the security shutters was located. "Come out, little librarian," Volkov taunted, firing blindly into the shelves. Books exploded in clouds of paper confetti. Elena reached the panel. She didn't hit the alarm. She hit the lockdown sequence. Heavy steel shutters slammed down over the windows and doors with a deafening clang, sealing the shop like a tomb. Volkov laughed. You just trapped yourself in here with me. No, Elena said, her voice echoing from the shadows. I trapped you in here with us. The back door to the alley, the only one not shuttered, burst open. It wasn't Enzo. It was Luca and 3 enforcers, weapons drawn. But Volkov was ready. He grabbed Elena, who had broken cover, to signal them, and hauled her up against his chest, pressing the cold barrel of his gun to her temple. Back off, Volkov screamed. Or I paint the walls with her brains? The room froze. Luca hesitated. Put the guns down, Volkov ordered, dragging Elena toward the back exit. I'm walking out of here, and I'm taking her with me. Elena felt Volkov's heart hammering against her back. He was terrified. She looked at Luca, and then she looked past him, into the darkness of the alleyway. She saw a pair of icy blue eyes reflecting the street lamp. Enzo was there. He had the shot, but he couldn't take it. Volkov was using her as a human shield. Elena knew she had to move. She remembered the gala. She remembered the tang of adrenaline. She wasn't a victim. Hey, Volkov, she whispered. Shut up. Do you know why I dressed ugly that night? I don't care. Because, she said, stomping her heel down onto his injured foot with all her strength, I like to be underestimated. Volkov howled in pain, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. That was all she needed. Elena didn't pull away. She dropped her weight, twisting out of his hold and falling to the floor. Bang! The shot didn't come from Volkov. It came from the shadows of the alley. A single bullet struck Volkov in the center of his forehead. He collapsed backward, dead before he hit the floor. Silence descended on the bookstore. Enzo stepped into the light. He lowered his weapon, his face a mask of pure terror that shifted into relief. He holstered the gun and sprinted to Elena, dropping to his knees. Elena, he gasped, his hands frantically checking her for injuries. Are you hurt? Did he touch you? Elena sat up, brushing dust from her skirt. She looked at the dead man, then at the man she loved. Her heart was racing, but she felt a strange, cold calm. I'm fine, she said. Enzo pulled her into his arms, crushing her against him. He was shaking. The most dangerous man in New York was shaking. I told you to wait for the guards. I told you not to engage. He was going to kill you. Elena whispered into his coat. I had to be the bait. It was the only way to draw him out. Enzo pulled back, staring at her. You planned this? You knew he was coming. I saw the perimeter breach on the cameras before the lights went out, she admitted. I knew you were 5 minutes away. I just had to keep him talking. Enzo looked at her with a mixture of awe and horror. He ran a hand through her hair. You really are crazy. I'm a Moretti, she smiled. Weakly, Enzo kissed her then, hard, desperate, and full of promises. Let's go home. Luca, clean this up. 1 year later, the anniversary dinner was held at Le Cuckoo. The staff was the same, but the atmosphere was different. No one dared look at the corner booth with anything other than reverence. Enzo sat in his usual spot, looking more devastatingly handsome than ever. He checked his watch. She was late. A small smile played on his lips. He knew she was doing it on purpose. The door opened. The room went silent, but not because of a stunning red dress. Elena walked in. She was wearing a shapeless, pilled gray sweater, a long plaid skirt, and thick, bottle-bottom glasses. Her hair was in a messy bun. She walked right up to the maitre d', who looked like he was about to faint. Reservation for Moretti? She squeaked, pushing her glasses up her nose. Enzo threw his head back and laughed. A loud, joyous sound that startled the entire restaurant. Elena marched over to the table, fighting a smile. She stood in front of him, hands on her hips. You're in my seat, mister, she said. Enzo stood up. He didn't care about the sweater. He didn't care about the glasses. He took her face in his hands and kissed her, right there in the middle of the restaurant. I'm never moving, he whispered against her lips. Happy anniversary, Kara. Elena smiled, pulling the glasses off and tossing them onto the table next to the diamond ring on her finger. Happy anniversary, boss. And as they sat down to dinner, the gray sweater scratching against his bespoke suit, Lorenzo Moretti knew he was the luckiest man alive. He had gone looking for a ceasefire, and instead he had found a war he was happy to lose. And that is how Elena Vance went from the girl in the gray sweater to the queen of the New York underworld. She thought she was dressing to repel a husband, but she ended up attracting a partner who saw the fire beneath the wool. It's a story that reminds us that confidence is the most attractive outfit you can wear, and that sometimes the wrong turn leads to the right destination. What do you think? Was Elena crazy to use herself as bait, or was she a genius? And would you ever dare to show up to a first date dressed like a disaster just to test the waters? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of romance, danger, and revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.